Maybe
Hello.
you
Hey.
just getting all my settings together. Hi, everyone who's filtering in. Welcome, welcome. Let's see here. What settings do we want here? Everyone can unmute. Let's mute up on entry. Yes. Right, I'm just looking for my captions. I feel like, here they are. I feel like Zoom reorganized. Great. We're gonna give it another minute or two for people to filter in. How are you doing today, Fun?
Good. How are you?
Good. My HVAC is finally going in. For anyone who has not been in North Carolina for the last 2 weeks, it's been record heat and I have not had AC the entire time. I'm getting it today and I'm so excited.
That's fantastic news.
It really is an exciting day for me. I'm telling everybody
Nice.
because I'm so thrilled.
Awesome.
It's been a muggy couple of weeks, I'm not gonna lie. Hi to everyone coming in. I want to encourage you to turn your videos on if you'd like. This is going to be an informal conversation. It's nice for you fun to see who he's speaking to. I promise we're not going to call you out if you're eating or looking off screen or anything like that. It just makes it a little bit more conversational. I also want to let folks know that as Yvonne is talking, if questions come up, excuse me, you can put those questions in the chat box, or you are welcome to unmute and ask them. Really encourage you to do that if you're feeling brave. Again, it just makes it a little bit more conversational, but we'll make sure we're watching the chat box as well the entire time. So I think we can get started as folks are filtering in. Let's see here. Welcome everyone to our next AMA. This is how to turn a not so great job market into a great opportunity for yourself. And I want to thank the participants for being here because this is a tough job market, especially if you're looking for that first job in tech, coming from a non-traditional background, making a career change. What's happening right now isn't easy for anyone. And I would say there's some particularly unique difficulties for folks in your position. So give yourself a pat on the back for being here and doing what you can to find that edge, figure out what you can to turn your background, leverage it into something amazing as you go into your next round of job applications and interviews. I'm going to let Yifan introduce himself, but just quickly, I'm Dana, head of customer success at Onramp. If you've been on any of these calls or applied to any of our opportunities, you have seen me, heard from me, got a text or email from me before. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm going to be on the call just to help facilitate or if there's any AV problems, but aside from that, Yifan, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you take it away from there.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah. Thanks so much, Dana, for the introduction. And yeah, just echoing what she said. Thank you, everybody who's here. The fact that you are here, especially during this tough time, is just such a great sign. It's already, I think, you're doing the right thing by trying to learn about what the techniques are to make the best of a not so great situation. So yeah, once again, thank you for being here. So what I like to do today is just help in any way I can based on my experience. Maybe the best way we can do that is I'll start with an intro about myself. After that, I do have just a couple of bullet points relevant to the topic of this conversation. We can probably think of it as seeding the conversation, so I won't talk too much in the monologue, because I think the last part, the best part is I'd really love to have a conversation with everybody here. So as Dana mentioned, please feel free to throw any question, anything. There's nothing that's off topic or anything. Happy to answer anything, even if it's something that isn't a normal question, if you will, because sometimes the most interesting insights can be derived from the most interesting questions. So yeah, with that said, a brief background about myself. So I'm Ethan. I am currently a software engineer at Amazon Web Services in the Elastic Load Balancing group. I've been a software engineer now at Amazon for about 2 years. Prior to that, let me start all the way from the beginning. I graduated undergrad in 2012 with a degree in biology. It was going to be pre-med. So already you see there's a bit of non-traditional background there, as I'm sure many participants may also come from non-traditional background. So testimonial from me, it's possible to achieve what you want. But it wasn't a straight shot from a bio major to software engineering. I decided during school that I didn't want to be a doctor. So instead I went into financial services management consulting after undergrad. After 3 years of that, I decided it was time to move on to pursue something completely different. That's when I decided to go to a boot camp, flight iron school in person in New York City in the fall of 2015. 3-month experience. And after that, found a junior engineering job at a medical device startup called Adhere Tech. I think it's still around today. Also in New York City. Spent 2 years there. You might be wondering, so that's the end of your journey, right? Well, for me, not so much. I did have an itch to go back into business, or more specifically, combined business and tech. So I ended up getting an MBA and going to business school for 2 years with the goal of transitioning to a product manager role. And so started business school in 2018, graduated in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, just interesting time. But we made it work and actually started off at Amazon as a product manager. After about a year of product management, got the itch to go back into software engineering. And so luckily I was able to do that within my team. And so since around 2021, I've been a software engineer at AWS. So, some things you might have picked on in my timeline might have parallels with either your past or your present. If there are, and any questions there, again, happy to answer those. But yeah, with that said, let me transition to the topic of conversation again, and try to see the conversation with some bits of advice around, how to make the best of the situation. So as we all might have experienced, or at least understand right now, the job market is not in the best shape. Arguably during the pandemic from 2020 to maybe 2022, the tech sector in particular was hot. Everybody was hiring all the time. And most recently, what happened was there was a correction in the other direction. There were restructurings, which is just a nice word for layoffs. People in the tech world have had a tough time, losing their job and having to find new jobs. But for the audience here today, the question is, well, for me, if I'm in a position right now where I am looking to transition into that field, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of opportunities right now, I might be competing with others with more experience. Like, really, what can I do? So my advice here is switching and flipping this weakness of a time into a strength. It's a little bit corny, but I'll kindly ask you to bear with me. And what I like to share there is just two things. So number one is the benefit of potentially not having so many opportunities right now is that you can focus on other things. So back when I was searching for my first tech job back in 2015, I was first, learning just tech itself. Like, what is tech? What is coding? Still very new to the skills in the software engineering space. I didn't really know what the layout of the tech industry looked like. Even, who do I contact for a job? So juggling all of those different things at the same time is very hard. And it's also hard to, even if you figure out how to do those things, how to apply them in the right proportion. And so one way to take advantage of the current time is that column of, trying to figure out and optimize like your interviewing schedule is probably, kind of unfortunately, of course, not such a big concern. But the upside is then you have more time to focus on all the other things. And so very specifically, if you're not, sending out so many or getting so many inquiries from recruiters, or trying to talk to people, or trying to network, if those opportunities aren't there, what that means is you do have more time to practice the technical coding interview or the behavioral interview without having those other things lingering in your mind. So that's one upside, I think. The other part is, I guess I'll kind of take back what I said earlier about not reaching out, is now is actually a really good time to reach out. Yeah, so I'm going to go 180 on what I just said, but in a very specific way. Some of us might think, in the traditional application process is we might reach out to a recruiter, or we might submit like an application online and the job postings, or go through a third party, et cetera, et cetera. But the best way I've found to really build like a good base for getting job opportunities, or at least getting your foot in the door, getting your resume read, and ultimately converting that into an interview, is really having nurtured a relationship beforehand. And so, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten just in general is that, relationships are very valuable. It's probably the most valuable thing in your career, and especially at the job seeking stage. What you don't want to do is need a relationship before you kind of have one. And by that, I mean, right now, even though there might not be many open opportunities, in terms of job listings, the one opportunity you do have is there are still people who, are looking to recruit, maybe not now, but from today up to the point where a job opening does open, you have that period to focus on developing that relationship, so that maybe several months or maybe more period of time has elapsed. When that job opening happens in a certain company, and you've reached out to them, 6 months ago, and develop a good relationship in those 6 months, you're good to go. The alternative is, you don't make that relationship, and you're knocking at the door asking for an interview at that 6-month mark. Well, somebody else who has developed that relationship will get priority over you. Yeah, so those 2 points, I hope, make sense to folks. If you have questions, clarifications, or even disagreements, I would love to hear what people think. But again, number one, when the volume of opportunities might be lower, it is itself an opportunity for you to focus on other things. I think one thing is practicing interviews, and the other thing is seeding relationships, getting conversations started, proving your interest in certain companies that you might be after, and really having recruiters or maybe folks who can make a recommendation for you within those companies, and really letting them know that you're a prime candidate. And in a sense, it's kind of like, just think of it as an extended interview over the course of months as well. And by the time you get to that stage again where there's opportunity, you kind of already passed a lot of the hurdles. Yeah, so that's what sort of my initial thoughts on how you can turn today into an advantage. So with that said, there's also a couple of other points I'd like to offer, and we can discuss. I know there's a couple bullet points in the LinkedIn posting, so I like to take this opportunity to address them. The next one is about how to tailor your preparation and job search strategy for the path that best fits you, but how do you even know what that path is? So I'm not sure what everybody in the room's individual journeys are. I'd love to get to know them, but I'm willing to bet that there might be like a bimodal distribution. One path is you might know exactly, hey, I want this job, right? And I'm going to go through Onramp in order to acquire it. The other path might be, well, maybe I don't know what I want, but this seems like a good springboard to get to somewhere that is not where I am right now. That was my position back when I was transitioning from consulting to software engineering. I knew I didn't like consulting. I didn't know if I would love software engineering, but I bet that it was better than consulting. And in that case, I think what really worked for me is one of the tenets that we use where I am at Amazon, which is working backwards. So for those who already kind of know what your target is, you might even have a company or in a position in mind. I think that's great, and you kind of have figured that out already. But for those who don't, I think this is a chance to kind of picture yourself and see where might I want to be. And you might think of it as, I'll try to refrain from using a technical term, but like a probability distribution is like, there's a 20% chance I want to be an engineer, a 30% chance I might actually want to do something in tech that's not engineering. And there's so many opportunities for that. UI, UX design, product management, like what I did, program management, so on and so forth. But having that in mind, but also having an idea of the different areas you want to explore, kind of like drawing a map, right, with different forks in the road. But the exercise of drawing that map out, I found really helpful for myself. Again, I didn't really know if I wanted to be a software engineer, and I was thinking of product management in my head at the same time. And I was lucky enough that over the following years, following my initial career switch, I was able to explore both paths. And at the end of the day, I decided to turn around, well, I guess loop back around and go back into the software engineering path. But that sort of probability distribution, exploring, drawing out that map might be helpful for folks who are trying to work that out. Yeah. Next bit is about preparing for a coding interview. So for those who do know and are pursuing that hard engineering path, what I'll say is there's really nothing around practice. It will likely be a long, bitter, hard journey to put in the hours to learn all the technical things, to figure out how you will impress your interviewer during the technical interview. But yeah, there's no way around really the hard work, but there are ways to make it efficient. And so for those who are interested in or who are preparing for the coding interview, again, nothing beats practice. I found LeetCode. You might have heard it before. It's a coding interview practicing platform. Very helpful. Definitely pay for the subscription to get all the questions with unlimited uses and whatnot. It's probably the best investment you'll ever make. I think it's like $100 a year. It is pretty pricey. It might be out of some folks' price ranges, so there might be like assistance programs out there, but it's definitely an investment that you want to make given the return. Just to give you an idea, when I transitioned from product management to software engineering in AWS, I was spending about 3 or 4 hours a day in addition to my product management job preparing. I'd wake up at 6 a.m., put in about an hour or two, then go to work. And then at night, I'll try to put in another hour. Then most weekends, I was putting in around 6 to 12 hours a day. So it's over the course of 3 or 4 months. So you might not need to work as like intensely as I did. I'm definitely on the more extreme side, but I was very motivated to get out of product management. And please don't let that scare you away, or you might think that's not enough work, which is also a valid opinion. I guess the point I'm trying to make is yeah, really push towards it, and again, there's kind of no way around it. That's life. So with practice, I would also say that mock interviews are absolutely necessary. You might be the best in the world at solving the problems on the platform, or reading a book or testing yourself, but everything changes when you mock a real interview environment where there are timing constraints, where there's a counterparty, there's somebody interviewing you and asking you questions, and you have to think on your feet. And for me, I used to think of myself as decent in solving the technical problems, but once you put a human in the equation and they were asking me questions, I just got really nervous. All the technical knowledge went out the door, and I would have been in real big trouble if I had not mocked interviews beforehand. So yeah, I think that's a non-negotiable. And ideally, you'd be doing, maybe later in your preparation when you have a solid technical base, 2 to 3 mock interviews a week if you can. Yeah. Um, when you're learning new techniques, though, for the technical part, one mistake I made was spinning my wheels a lot when I couldn't answer a tough problem, like when I'm practicing certain engineering questions. So I would spend like hours and hours just trying to figure it out on my own. And I thought that the process of struggling through it was beneficial. But there is a better way. And the better way is just don't spin your wheels too much if you're really not getting it. Don't try to brute force, because after about an hour of trying to figure it out on your own and really making marginal progress, you're really not getting a good return on investment on your time. So if you're ever in a situation when you're working on a technical problem, I would say spend half an hour on it. After the half hour, look up a hint if you can. And after getting the hint and still being unable to solve it over the next 30 minutes, so after a full hour since you've started on the problem, just look at the answer, try to understand the answer, and do the problem again. I might maybe follow up practicing a problem of the same type. But yeah, learn from my mistake. I don't think brute forcing really works. It's a lot more efficient that way. You'll probably find yourself making quicker progress. And yeah, you don't really get anything from trying to spin your wheels too much. Lastly, about the interviews, the other half of the technical interview would be behavioral interviews. The one technique that's helped me in any sort of behavioral interview is having what I call a story bank. So the way that interviews are conducted at Amazon is, Amazon has a list of leadership principles that are kind of a succinct, list of bullet points on tenets and principles that defines the Amazon culture. And the way that they, they'll ask you, hey, how have you, demonstrated a bias for action, or like diplomatic disagreement in a past job. And for that style of interview, having a story bank, which is basically a list of stories that you have, come up with that reflect real situations in your prior employment and address key points of what the interviewer is looking for, has been, really helpful. And your real job is just to identify what the interviewer is looking for during a certain behavioral question, and then, reaching out and grabbing that story from the story bank to answer their question. And it works for interviews, that aren't really in the Amazon style, but most behavioral interviews do always have a flavor of they're trying to understand, one aspect of your personality or the way that you've demonstrated that your way of working that, tells them a little bit more about who you are. And having that story bank is a pretty efficient way to prepare and to perform in the interview. Yeah, so just 2 more points before we open it up. The next one is how to balance your life, well-being, and ongoing responsibilities with your job search. Yeah, especially during this time, it's definitely okay to feel stressed out. It's definitely okay to feel a little down. I definitely felt that way when I was both in consulting. Even when I was studying for my MBA, I wasn't really sure that product management was for me. And I wasn't doing really so great on interviews, to be honest, in the beginning of the process. And when I was transitioning from product management to software engineering, those are some dark times, to be honest. And I've definitely had to fight harder than usual sometimes. So if that's your case, I think my advice there would be to delegate anything in your day-to-day that you can, so that you can focus on, getting better, performing, making those connections, like I mentioned before, and practicing. I don't have kids myself, but many of my peers, when I was in coding school, had children. So if you have children, one technique I've seen that works really well is that they make a deal with their spouse, their partner, if they're around, to say, hey, for the next X number of months, could you please devote a little bit more of your time to kind of take away my responsibility for looking after the kids? And the deal is then after I get my sweet job, I'm going to pay you back. We're all going to celebrate, and I'll take a bigger portion of that. But for now, this would really help me, get time and concentrate on, leveling up my skills there. So I've seen that work, and you have to pay back the deal. That's part of the deal. The other part is when I was transitioning from coding school to search for my first engineering job, I just did not have a lot of money. I spent a lot of my savings on coding school, and I was in New York City at the time, so living expenses were pretty high. So if anybody has, financial limitations, sometimes you really just have to bite down and make sacrifices. So basically what I did was I bought powdered meals to eat. This is kind of extreme, probably not recommended for everybody, but I would limit all of my lunches and most of my dinners, I think $2.50 just to eat powdered meals. It was Soylent. There's a lot better brands now, in my opinion, but when I'm not eating powdered meals, I would eat chicken nuggets and salad from Trader Joe's. So that was maybe $4 or $5 a meal. It's a little extreme. I probably wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but don't be afraid, don't be ashamed, don't be like if you have friends, no one will really care, to be honest. But yeah, if you have to go through some extremes, in this case to live frugally, just do it. You'll be glad you did, and once you get that job, you can kind of splurge a little bit afterwards. But yeah, don't be afraid to make sacrifices. And when you do make the sacrifices, bite down, because this is all for something really good, something really nice in the near future. And yeah, I've had friends who even skipped, when I was in my mid-20s, our nice house parties on the weekends to prepare. We kind of made fun of them for it. And we said, hey, why is this guy not here? He's at home, he's studying. It's like, oh man, that's kind of lame, right? Well, he was able to turn that lame thing that he did into a software engineering job a couple months down the line. So yeah, if there's a little bit of peer pressure to go out, it's your decision what you want to do, but don't let peer pressure kind of influence you from too much from your responsibilities and getting a job and what you need to do there. Last but not least, don't be afraid to take a break. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to just work and study all the time. You should make connections all the time. One of my friends who, not exactly software engineering, but started a company, he would have this rule where he would work, really hard, 12, 14-hour days during the weekdays and on Saturday. But no, on Sundays. Saturday was what he called a sacred day where he didn't do any work at all. And he said this is the most important thing to keep his progress sustainable. And that was something I kind of did, but not so much. I think on Sundays, I would max myself out at like 4 or 6 hours of studying. Still a little bit intense, a little crazy, but yeah, don't be afraid to take a break either. But after you take your break, you should be ready to get back into it. And finally, this is sort of the tagline that I use. You've tried, you failed, tried again, you failed again, and you feel like you're in this cycle. What do you do now? Not in software engineering, but that was the sense that I got when I was interviewing for management consulting jobs out of undergrad. I kind of failed every interview until I got a good break. And if you find yourself in a similar position, the advice I would have is, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. One is the how of looking at it, and the other is the what of looking at it. And so in one sense, what you're pursuing, let's say interviewing at a specific type of company for a specific type of role, you still want that, but you're just not able to achieve the results that you want. That I would recommend the how. So is there something that you're doing that isn't working? Are you studying not enough, or are you studying so hard that you're burning yourself out and not being able to perform when you need to perform? Are you not doing your homework and not really understanding what the interviewer is looking for, and not literally asking? You can literally ask interviewers, hey, what are you looking for the interview, if you're having your phone screen or whatnot, and so on and so forth. Are you not understanding the industry? And that's where you're slipping. So that's one way to look at it. But the other way is the what. which is even if you feel like, you're doing everything you can, it could also be that what you're pursuing might not be, fully a good fit for you. And so this kind of goes back to the earlier part about knowing what your path is. I've had friends in coding school who ended up not being software engineers at all and just loving what they did. Some, pivoted to become like developer advocates at tech companies. Some have pivoted to becoming like designers. Others, product managers and so on. And that really wasn't their first aim, but over time, they kind of adjusted their what, they followed their map, and they decided to take other forks in the road when it made sense. I've seen great outcomes there. And quite frankly, there were some that even just went back to what they did before because they said, oh, I explored this path. I did the interviews. It turns out relative to, my new understanding of the industry and the jobs now, I actually kind of like what I was doing before. So I'll go back there. And there were not an insignificant amount of my peers at coding school who, ended up just going back to what they did before and, getting great careers afterwards. Anyways, okay, so that's like half an hour of talking on my end. Hopefully those points made sense, are helpful. Yeah, at this point, wondering if folks have questions or whatnot. See, so Dana, what's the best way to do this?
Yeah, I was just
Well,
going to
I
say
have a question.
there do seem to be some questions in the chat. But I also want to encourage folks, if anybody has questions where you just want to unmute and do that first, and then if nobody bites there, then we'll go through the chat and start asking questions. But be bold, be brave. Feel free to unmute and just ask if you'd like.
Can I ask first question?
Yeah. Hi.
I really appreciate if I just you share your experience and your transition from undergraduate study at Yale in biology, then 3 years consulting, then move to school to study web development, then move to other field. So my question is, around the way, how did you find the way to pivot? Because to me, all those fields, even the MBA, have nothing to do with technology. It's more in the business side. Also, you have the CFA level 1. This also in the financial service area. So how did you connect those dots and pivot and make progress?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty crazy path, right? Maybe the best way to answer this question is sort of what led me to those transition points at each point in my journey. So undergrad, why biology? It's cultural. I'm Chinese. I was born in China. As many of us know that, doctor is one of the default paths. And that's what I was taught. So that's where I started. It's kind of as simple as that. And I'm sure there's other folks on the call here who might have like a cultural family, some sort of background that might be pushing you in one direction. I think it's totally fine to really just start there. So that's where I started. Now, how did I change and what made me change? I just didn't like biology that much, really. And looking forward is, did I really want to be a doctor was a question that I had never asked myself. And for my parents, it turns out that it wasn't that they wanted me to be a doctor. They just wanted me to be successful. And doctor was kind of like the only path that they were familiar with. But so this is kind of like, again, a how and a what, what be successful, how, well, we know doctor, let's try it out. Well, if that how doesn't work, there's another how. So practically speaking, then, so that's sort of like, how do you think about my past and my background? The new ingredient in the mix is two things. One is, how do I find out what other paths are there? And the other is what is actually practical for me to do. So the first path is, I was at Yale. There's a lot of ambitious people there. And I had a lot of friends who introduced me to, oh, you can do consulting, you can do banking. There's all these other things I just didn't know existed that you could do. So for the folks here, if you're thinking about what paths I can go down, hit up your friends and hit up their friends and hit up their friends' friends and so on and so forth to kind of uncover what is out there. Because especially during these times, things are changing. And they might be different from what let's say we're culturally familiar with. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is practicality. It's like, well, I probably can't do law because, well, I don't like law either. I probably can't do something else that required me to do undergrad work that is aligned with a long-term path, because at this point, I've already spent 3 years in college. So the practical thing is like, well, you can still do consulting because you don't need any background to do consulting. You can kind of switch to it pretty easily. So practically, that was just one path that was open, as long as I did the work to prepare for the interview. That's that. Okay, so the next point is consulting to software engineering. So this is, I think, the real turning point, where the question I've never asked before, but now had the courage to ask is like, what do I really want to do? And when I was younger, I was like computers. So let's try that. The truth is, though, I was kind of having a very tough time in management consulting. So I was kind of looking for anything, and computers, fine, that worked. The other reason was I had a colleague at my consulting firm who did boot camp before. So another piece of advice for people in the call is if there's somebody who's walked the path before, like don't try to walk the path yourself. Ask them, what paths are available, what they did, what their experience was. It's kind of like you don't make a mistake if you can learn from others' mistake. But don't take a risk if you can learn from others' decisions too. That's another piece of advice there. So yeah, I think if my colleague had not gone to code school himself, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to make that big leap. So I'll be really quick. How do I decide to go back to MBA? Well, this is actually going back to my parents. My parents wanted me to have an advanced degree. So if you're challenging your cultural background, I think it's not a terrible idea to still respect it. I've had friends who've kind of really turned their backs on their cultural background, and they kind of regretted that down the line. It's a pretty unfortunate, pretty sad in my opinion. But I still, honored my parents and said, okay, I'll do this. And then, going down the product management line, I said, okay, well, this is a good compromise because there's a tech aspect of this as well. And I've always been interested in product management too. So boom, there we go. So MBA to product management was not that controversial. That's kind of what I was aiming for the entire time. So that's actually another piece of advice. If you kind of know what you want to do, just go for it. Don't doubt yourself. Sometimes you just have to execute as well. So the last most interesting part is product management back to engineering. For me, it turns out after a year of experience, product management really wasn't a great fit. And relative, so this is kind of similar to my peers in coding school who decided to go back to what they were doing before. But sometimes it's worthwhile to dip your toes in something, get some experience to really understand it and maybe separate the myth from the reality. That was my experience in product management. And the outcome was just engineering was great. And there's all these things that I had experienced before, but I really didn't treasure about engineering. But sometimes it's what the trick there is some pivots are harder than others. So it's arguably a lot easier to pivot from engineering to product management than the other way around. And so the remedy to that was, like I described, it was a huge grind, but it is possible. So yeah, I guess a piece of advice there too is, don't be afraid to go back if you know in your heart and through practical experience it's the right thing to do. And the second part of that is, and sometimes you really do have to, suffer quite a bit and grind, but at the end of it, you'll be happy you did. Yes, that's sort of a tour of my journey and how I thought about each point in that journey.
I have a question about sort of, you make the first point of contact when you're new to the job. You're out there, you're networking. How do you follow through with those networking opportunities? How do you make those sustainable?
Yeah, for sure. If I were to say one thing, it's really empathize with what the other person wants, right? So this is kind of like a business technique is it's almost like salesmanship. The key to salesmanship isn't really the selling itself. The key to salespersonship is understanding what's in it for the other person. So when you're talking to a recruiter, right, it's the obvious answer is, okay, they're looking for people to recruit. The better answer is when through your conversations, getting more details about what that is. So are you as a person today or potentially in the future a good fit for them? If so, what are the steps that you need to take to get to a point where they're going to give you an interview, right? So you kind of goals there as well, but make sure those goals align with what they're looking for. And especially in today's environment, one good question could be, what does your timeline look like, right? And you could even establish a mechanism. So for instance, I think it's a good idea just to be very frank about, okay, like if you're not looking for anybody now, would you mind if I reached out in a month, or would you reach out to me? What is a good mechanism for keeping this relationship going? Actually, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. The horse there is, what do you think your business need will be in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? Is it possible? And if so, how can I be part of that plan, right? And many times in the beginning, you don't really start with, oh, well, I want to interview. One thing I've done is leverage either my past experience or my current curiosity. So my past experience is, for my first job, hey, I have a biology degree and your company is medical devices. There's a fit there, right? So that's kind of, again, understanding what their needs are. And also I say, okay, well, I'm into biotech too. Here's some recent papers that I've been reading that might be applicable for you guys. So demonstrating value that's aligned with what they're looking for. Sometimes it is sort of like a, how do you say this, a prearranged dance, right? Kind of, they should be pretty, they're not dumb either, right? But if you go through those motions, that by itself kind of communicates that you understand the game, right? So even though, it might be a little ritualistic, I think it's still important to let them know kind of implicitly that, hey, I speak your language. That's also a part of it. All of that boils down to also at the end of the day, think about it from their perspective. They're looking for, good candidates as well. But a big part of their job is also risk management. So think of it from there. Another way to think about this is, how do you make yourself the least risky candidate? Instead of like, I'll be the smartest guy, or how do you make it so that they don't have any bad feelings about you? And I find that a really powerful and underutilized approach. Because at the end of the day, like if you're a smart person, but you're like not a nice person, like you're not a good fit, and it'd be a shame if you were brought on and they kind of had to discover that on the job. If you understand that that's one of their concerns, you can address that ahead of time. And that could be part of your, relationship building, so on and so forth. Yeah, but I think the most important part then is you do have to seal the deal. You can't be just a nice conversation where you're, chit-chatting. You do want to make it clear that, hey, my goal is to have an interview and, get an offer. So yeah, hope that helps. Nice.
Okay. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I have a question. I hope I didn't interrupt the previous guy. Okay. Okay, so I'm actually studying the professional certificates from AWS services. I'm interested in the cloud system. I think it's tricky, the classes, but rewarding. And
yeah.
I'm interested is I have two things that I want to ask you. The first one is like how the path in how to not to give me that job. I'm not asking now, give me a job. No, because there's a website for that.
Sure.
So like what will be the path? Somebody off the streets wants to and took the course like me, wants to get in Amazon. What will be like your best advice for that? And also, I would like to, because I seen the chat and all that, and like everybody, different walks of life, and nice to meet you all. It seems like this market, it's just like the title. I find it quite very like it matched with the topic, just so spot on. So kudos to you to that. Because I noticed there's a lot of distress and despair and uncertainty when it comes to the technology and all that. And while everybody's an individual with different needs, size, shapes, colors, and everything, I would like to share my testimony, hopefully, because I like to motivate people and make people feel better. I'm interested in psychology myself. I actually had to return after I finished my course with Harvard. I took the CS50, the whole entire series. I even met the Professor Malin in person one time, shook hands and all that. So, but I still no job. And what I did in my case, I went back to my career as a fitness trainer, personal trainer. I still doing, and what I do is incorporate something that I didn't did before, which is the online and tech part. I started using Python, Java, all that, because my expertise is in Python and Java, not the JavaScript, although I know, but Java, the language, and Python. So I started to practice that. GitHub, people, GitHub is amazing. And commit, write a code, commit, and all that, and all that. So I got that from a pro, actually, that is working for a tech company. So keep committing, even if you don't get a job. So I actually, some of those commits, I use it for like some of my online coaching stuff that I do on the side. So I can get money, I can practice on tech while I still working full-time as a personal trainer. So I wanted to share that. Now, business, let's go back to business, AWS.
Yeah. No, first of all, thank you for sharing that. One thing I really liked is you do, right? One word, you're doing it. Not only are you learning, but you're applying that, and applying it sounds like in a way that's relevant to what you're doing right now. I think so very practically, if you get an interview in the interview process, you definitely want to bring that up, because that sort of mindset is exactly what an employer is looking for, someone who's just doing, right? And you might not even be the best in the world, at it. You don't even have to be close to the best in the world, but as long as you do, you're getting experience in one way, the best way you can, because quite frankly, if you're not employed, there's no better way to get experience than to do it on your own. And your enthusiasm, right? Like reaching out, you said, to the professor, like that shows that you know how to interact with people as well. Part of the reason I bring that up is if you're getting a certificate from AWS, chances are like one of the paths that might be a good fit. So to answer your original question, I think one question is like, what is the path, right? Do you want to be an engineer, or do you want to be a program manager, who is somebody who manages the software project but aren't executing itself? But we need people to manage the project, and they need to understand the technical aspects. There's another path which is called solutions architect. Usually solutions architects first have engineering experience, but what solution architects do is they help customers use AWS to build solutions that are relevant for the customer's business and for the customer's problems. I think especially for someone like you, right, from the 2 minutes that we've known each other, or 45 minutes, sorry, you're a trainer, so you know how to interact with people, you know how to talk to people, you know how to empathize with people, you know how to push people as well. That's important too. And I see a great fit there, just working with clients, right? And tech, there are plenty of opportunities that use that same skill set. Yeah, so then looping back to your question, so I'll answer it in two ways. One is like kind of the fuzzy way, and then one is like, okay, I want the job, how do I get the job? So to finish the fuzzy way is, and this applies to me too, is like kind of, if you're aware of your strengths and you play to them, I think that's the best way to find something that you will both succeed in and enjoy. And I think people don't spend enough time kind of introspecting that way. The flip side of that is, what are your weaknesses, right? Like, I think we all have to be honest with ourselves, what our weaknesses are. But the good news is that just from my personal experience and the experience of people who I admire, the good news is that you don't have to turn your weaknesses into a strength. I know that's some advice that some people adhere to. I found it a more efficient use of time, which is to make sure your weaknesses just are up to a level where they don't hinder your strengths, right? So I think it's really hard and sometimes impractical to turn a weakness into a strength. I think it's better to just play to your strengths and make sure your weaknesses aren't a liability. So that's for the fluffy part. Now, for the real stuff. So let's take AWS specifically. The job website is probably the most practical way like find out what's there, visit it, probably visit it every day if you're really serious about it, because postings change all the time. Something that is posted one day, you want to be the first person, because you will be competing, there will be a queue of people. So making sure you're on the job posting site is important. The other part is, actually, I won't speak about this too much, but there might be recruiters as well. So if a recruiter reaches out to you, foster that relationship. You might reach out to recruiters as well. I personally don't know how that works, so I can't give too much advice there, but I believe that's possible. Referrals are important. So if you know somebody who does work at AWS who can give you a referral, they don't have to be in the same job family that you're looking for. If you're a personal trainer, I have seen when I was in New York City, success stories of personal trainers getting referrals from their clients. So if you have a broad client base, one of your client worked at AWS, I've seen that work. Because the client would be like, "Oh, well, this guy's my personal trainer, and she has these skills, and they work so hard, and they help me, and they understand people. This is great." Back to the point I was talking about earlier about de-risking. Referrals are an awesome way to de-risk, because if you can have someone vouch for you who's already in the company, that takes away a lot of the nervousness from employers. So for big companies, there's really not any other way, I think, that's obvious from those points. For smaller companies, I think you can really leverage relationships and, buddy get to know someone, and they might grease the wheels a little bit. But for large enterprises, it's kind of official. There is a process. That's sort of how things work there. So I think it's not too practical to try to think of ways to game the system. It probably won't work. Better to kind of focus on the official channels. That's my opinion for bigger companies. Actually, and then the last piece of advice I would give is, in your position right now, you don't have to jump to AWS like immediately. It might actually make sense for you to get like a position at some other company first, just to get experience, just to get something on your resume, work there for a year or two or whatnot, and then hop from there to AWS. It's kind of like personal training. I'm not going to try to bench press 2 plates immediately. I'm going to bench nothing at first and then work my way up. Sometimes you have to do that as well. But if you have like something that you're working towards, you'll get there, no problem. Yeah, awesome.
You talked about networking and the importance of referrals and talking to pretty much everyone that you can. I know you can go to LinkedIn and contact people that way. Say, can I pick your brain for a few minutes, talk to you, see what kind of information you have about the company. I like doing that. Coming to these AMA events is good. Going to job events, anything like that. My question was, are there ways to connect with, are there other ways to connect, especially with other engineers, maybe in companies, and any ways that I can like work with them and demonstrate my skills, even if we're not working together at the same company?
Yeah. So it's some of a multi-part question. I'll try to answer parts of it, but remind me if something's not answered. So one mechanism is like events, fairs, kind of different from a job fair. But for example, Google has like Google I/O, which is I think once a year they have a big showcase of all the products they're releasing, all the work they've worked on. It is kind of invite only, so you kind of have to have a connect. But there are other sort of events that are held by companies that are open to the public, whose purpose is not, a job fair or even networking. Their purpose is kind of marketing. But you want to go to those events, because at those events you will meet engineers who are excited. They're there to talk about the product, and you're there to demonstrate your excitement for the product, and then start that relationship. Especially if you're in a bigger like urban area, there's San Francisco, New York City, whatnot. There's got to be tons of those events. So go on companies' web pages. Maybe they'll have an event section, and just look at the events, in-person events nowadays, and even virtual events. It's something better than nothing. Attend events. That's one thing. The other thing is like meetups. I haven't been to a meetup in forever, but when I was job searching, I would go like pretty much every other night I was in New York City. I was lucky there, but it's literally meetup.com. Right. And you can search for like, tech gatherings. Back then, crypto was big. So there's a crypto gathering Tuesday. There's pizza. There's people who are talking about it. Just go. and you never know, what might come of that. But it's kind of corny, but what is luck? Like luck is when preparation meets you just doing a lot of things, and that generates luck. So you can generate luck that way. What else? Yeah, maybe the last part is like I've had the densest collection of success talking to friends of friends of friends. And there's several reasons, right? One is if your friend is referring you to talk to their friend, you've already vouched that they're worth your time. And similar to interviews, you're low risk. You're not, someone that people wouldn't want to talk to. And it also shows that you are actively, searching as well. Yeah, so that sort of connection, however tenuous it might be, however degrees of separation, probably gets you more substance per effort expended. The trick there is you do have to have a seed network to begin with, but if you have that seed network, I find just using your network probably the most efficient way. But barring that, events, that's sort of the things that are top of my mind right now. Do you have a second part of your question? I forgot.
No, I think you answered everything.
Okay, cool.
I have a question.
Everybody.
Oh, go ahead.
Awesome. I just wanted to say hey to everyone in this space. I'm happy to be here. This is my first time attending one of these AMAs, and it's really cool to just hear your expertise and your advice. It's really been awesome just to have this space open to everyone. I just wanted to tell everyone that you can connect with me if you're open to engaging with a software engineer. My name is Jamira, and I'm from Atlanta, and I'm currently teaching at a boot camp right now. So I'm a teacher. I actually graduated from a boot camp as well. So I'm actually a graduate of Flatiron School. So if there's any Flatiron grads in your space, feel free to connect.
Nice.
I also have a bachelor's in business finance, so I did my toes in finance as well. So I love hearing you talk about finance too. I also was a full-time athlete while I was in school, so I love sports. So if anyone's interested in sports, definitely reach out to me. We can talk about our shared interests as well and our common goals. I know a lot of people in this space are looking for jobs. So I'm open to chat about shared interests. So feel free to engage with me. And I hope everyone is doing well. And I hope we can connect. Thanks again.
Nice. What did you play?
You guess? Can you make a guess?
I ran track in college, so I'm going to say track.
That's a good guess. Pretty close. I played basketball actually. I was a point
Nice.
guard, kind of like shooting guard. So I was a combo guard. Love scoring. I love team environments as well, which is why I love like tech in general. Is like the team spirit is really cool to me. So I kind of get that competitiveness as well. And also just being in a space of being like a corporate athlete is really cool. I love hearing about how you work so hard and like you're prioritizing your study. I love that aspect of being a learner constantly and also just like being competitive too. So yeah, it's good to hear. You played in college too, or did you run in college?
Yeah, I ran in college. It's a lot less fun than high school because it's way harder and people are competitive. But I mean, that's a
Yeah.
great point that you bring up, right? Like those qualities that you might have developed for those on the call. Doesn't have to be sports, could be music, anything. But definitely mention those in your interview. I've mentioned my athletic background in every interview I've been in. It's always been received positively. I'm still milking it today, like what, a decade later. And also networking to maybe address the previous question a little bit is my software engineering job. So it wasn't 100% on merit. The person who hired me was actually part of Yale's track and field team. He was actually the record holder for the shot put. And that sort of I got my foot in the door there too.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So similar to your friends of friends network, it's a lot easier to start connections if you have some degree of similarity. So definitely start there first because you'll probably get the biggest return on investments in your networking
Absolutely.
journey there.
No, you've been great to just learn from just all of the soft touches that you've been personalizing everyone's experience here. I'm learning so much from how to do that, especially in a big space like this. So I commend you for that. But yeah, thanks again. Appreciate you.
Nice, thanks. And there was another question in parallel, right?
Yes, I have a question that's about coming from a product background, which is my experience. And but before I say that, I also wanted to share, I also failed lots of management consulting interviews in college. And I absolutely have that experience of mistaking my parents' desire for me to succeed as wanting me to do something very specific, which they didn't actually care about. So, you know, meandering, and now here I am. And I like foresaw a little bit that this would be a problem, but it's interesting when it has literally happened where I've applied to something, for example, and then the HR person or someone's team is like, I think you should apply to our product manager job. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to do something else specifically. So I'm curious from that background, how you would think about maybe is it like finding the companies where they see value in someone who has a product background and also has the capacity to train someone into engineering, or like, how would you navigate? What are the like high return opportunities there?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it sounds like you want to be an engineer ultimately. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors here. One is just like in today's job market, part of it is you take what you can get, right? So if there's nothing else, like being a product manager, it's not engineering, but it's better than, spending another 6 months in the job search, in my opinion. So I think that's, again, making that relevant today, that's definitely like a part of it we all don't want to forget. Another way to think about it is Booleans, right? So this is a concept from computer science, but it's relevant here too, is to what degree is product management and software engineering and, right? I can do both, or another way, both are not mutually exclusive. And to what degree it's an or, I can do either or whatnot. So basically, like if you go down a law path, right? It's probably a lot harder to go from law to software engineering than it is to go from product to software engineering, especially product management in a tech company. So, opportunity cost wise, it's a better option, right? And then there's always a third option of doing nothing. That's always an option. So we should all be always cognizant of doing nothing is always an option if it's the right thing to do. Approaching it, I'd probably be honest with the interview person. Especially if it's an early company, they probably have a lot more flexibility if you get to wear many hats and say, I'll start as a product person, here's what I can offer, but ultimately I am looking for engineering. Actually, let me revise that a little bit. You make the assessment of whether that is a worthwhile thing to do. If you think from your conversations with the hiring person, by the way, Dana, please cut me off at any point because I know we're at the top of the hour.
Feel free to go for a few more minutes if you want to. It's really up to your availability, and appreciate it.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Yeah. So I guess so. I'll finish answering this question, but for everybody on the call, I apologize, I haven't read all the messages. I haven't actually read any messages, but my name should be on the Onramp announcement. So please feel free to connect. I would ask just add a little blurb in your connection to say, hey, I was on the Onramp event, so I know to give your connection a priority. And happy to answer questions on LinkedIn. Anyways, so back to the question is decide like how much do you reveal about your intentions, right? It's a little Machiavellian, it's a little tactical, it's a little might seem unsavory, but don't rule it out from your toolkit, I would say. So that's one thing. The other is like being cognizant of what career transitions are easy. I kind of touched on this earlier, but it's a lot easier to transition from engineering to product. It's a lot harder to go from product to engineering for many reasons. One is just like it's not a common thing, The other is technical skills are just hard to pick up on and practice and get to a professional level. Product, it's product business, it's a little softer. You can kind of finagle the interview, at that point a little bit more. But I'd say it's easier that way as well. But it is possible. So that's another influence. Yeah, to be honest, I don't have much more to say about that. It's really not the best. There's no easy path, I would say, for you. I think that's my assessment. But again, going back to the current times, it's if someone's interested in you for product, that's better than you struggling with nothing. So yeah. And also you can always go back to school, right? I have seen product people get masters in engineering and then transition. One or two, very uncommon, but it is possible as well. So if you don't decide to go on the product route, figure out what your next step is and how you get there, and also like turn your product, actually no. So then if you go to the product route and then you decide to transition later, if you transition internally, whatever, that's great, that works. If you decide to transition externally, really, really hard to do. I probably wouldn't recommend kind of taking that path as a first choice. That's just, it's a lot harder than probably needs to be. But wherever you go, try to figure out how to make your past an asset, right? When I was, how do I get my management consulting job? I sold the interviewers on like, well, did you guys ever have a biology person? Did you guys ever have anybody who tried to apply the scientific method to modeling, financial risk? I bet you didn't. And I bet you would benefit from having one. When I applied for MBA, is how the way I sold myself was, how many software engineers are applying to MBAs? Right, 0. Don't you want to be the first, the MBA program who gets software engineers, especially in this day and age? I know you want that, and here I am. So figure out ways to turn what you have into assets for the situation. That's probably the best advice I can give. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
I do have one more question. Just, I think you go through those traditional school, Ivy League school, also went back to school to learn just engineering, but they have so many type of engineering, just electrical engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering. You cannot say engineering. So how did you wait? Just there are so many certification, and the cost is much cheaper than going to traditional school. And also learning is unlimited. So how did you utilize our time to make the best of it?
Yeah, so I actually did consider getting an engineer or a master's degree in engineering when I wanted to switch from product to engineering. There's no easy answer. So I'll tell you the dimensions. One is time. Right? I think time to me was the most important thing. How long do I have to invest in something before I can use it to leverage to the next step? Well, if you're doing a master's, that's a year or two. That's a really long time. If I just grinded really hard, as hard as I've ever worked in my life for 6 months, I can get the same thing. Okay. Can I bear the hard work and the bitterness that comes with the grinding? Yes, I know I can. Okay, I'll go down that path. So time is one. The other is cost. So I'd have to pay for the master's versus 5-6 figures, whatever the cost is, versus for LeetCode, I pay $130 a year and I can get the same output or outcome in a shorter period of time. Okay, I'll go down that path. The other is like long-term future prospects. So the master's degree is instrumental for my next step, but it might also have long-term value where maybe 10 years down the line, I want to be a manager instead. I can leverage that master's degree. Or actually, the real question is, can I leverage the master's degree? And when I thought about that question versus studying on my own, it turns out that having that degree, it really doesn't really matter that much for my longer term, decade, 2-decade plus plans. And so, okay, so I don't, in that world, the cost benefit doesn't make sense. Yeah, and I think the last aspect is, well, cost. So we already talked about cost. The last aspect is the state of the world. So and the industry, but let's start with industry, is that how much does my employer value an engineering, a master's degree versus some other path versus me self-studying? Does that make a difference? For some jobs, for some companies, that makes a big difference. It's almost like a hard requirement that you have a degree, right? So you have to do your homework to say, okay, what are the actual requirements? For engineering at Amazon, that was not a hard requirement. And the gist is, because I'm already in the group, I was confident that I could get, an interview at least. And if I got an interview, all that matters is if I have the brains to solve the interview. And so then if I can do that through both the master's degree as well as teaching on my own, right? And then I pull those other factors into the equation. Okay, the self-teaching path still wins, and comparison. And then, blowing up to the world, then in the larger world, what matters more for software engineering? Is it your brains, or is it, a piece of paper that certifies your brains? It's like, well, if you have the brains, you have the brains. So, that works. So that's sort of the framework, I guess, in making those decisions. And then moving forward, I think that this is the last thing I'll say is, like you mentioned, I think those programs evolve. Like, what's after boot camps, right? Like, I think Onramp is awesome. I love their apprenticeship model, right? That didn't exist back in 2015, right? In 2015, coding boot camps are still pretty new. But if you think about yourself in the near future, it's like, okay, well, will this apprenticeship model evolve as well? Right? And how will the market and employers respond to that? And given my assumptions there, then how can I position myself to take a path? It's kind of like, was it Wayne Gretzky or some hockey player, aim where the puck is moving, not where the puck is? If you can anticipate where the puck is moving in terms of the path that you can take, I think it's helpful to think of it holistically that way. All right, I think I might have to call it time on my end. But yeah, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Please include a message so I know who you are and that you're coming from the Onramp. But yeah, it's been awesome, being able to share my experience, my advice, and being able to interact with all the folks on the call. So again, thank you all so much for joining today. Hopefully this was useful.
Fun. Thank you so much. You went above and beyond. Really appreciate it. If you are reading any of these messages flooding into the chat, hopefully you see how grateful everyone is. Participants, thank you so much for being here. We have lots more great events coming up. Please keep checking our website, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.